with Systema when I started removing the thought process away from things. Then I think that's where I sort of began to really sort of get the sense of how powerful, how useful, and how flexible it could be.
This is Glenn Murphy with NC Systema, and this is Systema for Life. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Glenn. Thank you.
Great to have you down here in North Carolina.
Great to be here.
Yeah, bro. So you've been in town for a few days, taking a few of our classes and doing a few privates.
I did, and looking forward to coming back down again.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've got a few events coming up. And then the big 4-day Wheeler Fest at the end of October. So,
yes, looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's always grand. But yeah, thanks for having you guys up in DC and Maryland. Have always been very supportive of our stuff, and it's nice that we all get together and, it's like an extended East Coast community.
Yes, yeah. I agree. It's a lot of fun.
Real. Cool. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Some folks know you from the seminar scene, or if they've rolled through DC and trained with you that way. But how did you, where are you based? And
Sure, where are
you from originally?
Well, originally from California. Grew up overseas. My father was career Navy, so I had a chance to live in some unusual places, moved around every couple of years, and then like most folks in the Navy, they ended up getting positioned over at the CIA and the Pentagon, where Dad finished out his career, and then we stayed here in the area.
Gotcha.
So we're based out of Tacoma Park, Maryland, which is just on the borderline of Maryland and Washington, D.C.
Okay.
We're known as Maryland Systema.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's just right on the edge, right?
Right on the edge, yeah.
Maryland Systema, formerly DC.
Sure, you cross the street, and one side you're on Maryland, the other side you're in Washington, D.C. So it's a great location for us.
And how often do you guys have classes there?
We have class 1 day a week now, although I'm zeroing in on another location that would allow us to stand up classes on Saturday afternoons.
Yeah.
And then when the weather is nice, we'll get a small group of us will train outside in a local park. Nice. And that's usually on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon as well.
Yeah. Outdoor training is always fun when you can get
It is. I enjoy it. Unfortunately, in DC, there's a short period during the year that allows us to do that. So we try to make the best of it as we can.
Jump straight from freezing to sweltering.
Freezing from sweltering, exactly. So, but we do that on occasion as well, and students seem to really enjoy that.
Great, nice one. So how did you come to Systema in the first place? Because I know you have a background in some other martial arts, notably Krav Maga, right?
Sure.
Can you tell us a bit about your journey, how you found your way?
Absolutely. So my journey to Systema, like a lot of folks, was not a direct path. I had, I think, saw a Groupon for 5 classes of self-defense, discounted price, went and checked that out. And it was actually Krav Maga. And I trained in that for a number of years at 2 different schools. Much like Systema, there are different versions or variations of it.
Yeah.
And after a period of time, I moved fairly quickly through the student curriculum and felt that there were some things that were sort of lacking in the training. So, for example, I was told in order to be a really good striker, I needed to sort of do traditional boxing. So I started taking boxing lessons, got my footwork down, got a lot of my striking down, at which point folks were saying, well, if you really need to learn to strike, you need to train in Muay Thai. You need to learn to use your elbows and your knees. So I started training in Muay Thai. Then folks were saying, well, if you go to the ground, you need to learn another style, Jiu-Jitsu. So I started training in Jiu-Jitsu, and then if you need to know weapons, you need to know Kali.
So this was within Krav? So there were Krav people telling you to go outside of Krav and train
outside, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the boxing folks were trying to get me to take the Jiu-Jitsu, and the Jiu-Jitsu folks were saying, well, we have Kali classes, why don't you try sort of those? And after a while, I found that the challenge I was having is that trying to blend all these different styles together, primarily because they were so technique-based, I found myself sort of like a computer that was running out of processing speed. I took a class in Systema, once again, just looking to sort of broaden my overall skills, and immediately realized that Systema would provide me with sort of a framework, almost like a motherboard or a new operating system that would allow me to very easily plug and play a lot of these other styles that I've been training in. In addition, because of my background and what I was doing during the day in sales and marketing, I really liked a lot of the stress control, a lot of the breathing, and a lot of the other things that I thought I could blend into my everyday job as well. I still train in some of these other styles, but I find that with the framework of Systema, it's much, much easier for me to take some of those things I'm learning elsewhere and then blend those in and have something that I think is a much more effective system for me.
Totally, yeah. Well put, summed up on that one. So your first, that experience was that you went along, did you understand what Systema was? Do you think right away when you ran into that class? Because I think that's a rare experience for most people who have trained a bunch of other styles. Normally people come in and they try to see Systema through the lens of what they've done already. Like how is this like or different to Muay Thai? Or how is this like or different to Aikido or Karate or whatever it's going to be? Like, do you feel like you came in with this big open mindset and you were ready to receive it? Or did it have to chip away at you a little bit?
It had to chip away at it. So I actually was training in Systema for about 2 years while I was still going through a lot of the regular courses. So
who was it initially that you took the class with?
It was with Jonathan Hahn.
In DC
in DC.
Yeah, great guy.
In DC. A small group, but what impressed me the most was the fact that I had such a challenge trying to understand what was happening. A lot of the other styles, once again, I could go in, the teacher would, the instructor would do something, and then it was simply a matter of mimicking it. Almost puppet-like. With Systema, when Jonathan and I first started training together, the style and what was happening to me was so different than what I had experienced in other styles that I said, well, this is something that I really need to learn more of.
I think that's a common experience, isn't it? I mean, that was mine too when I came to it. It wasn't just that this was a bit different. When I first did it, I'm like, I'm outclassed here. And I don't understand why I'm outclassed. It's not just that he's moving faster than me or kicks or punches better. It's just like, I'm just outclassed all round.
Sure, because we were moving slow to start. And I think when things really began to click for me was when I realized that the challenge of trying to speed the CPU process up in order to blend in all these different techniques with Systema, when I started removing the thought process away from things, then I think that's where I sort of began to really sort of get the sense of how powerful, how useful, and how flexible it could be when I didn't focus on individual fancy moves or trying to reach into a tool bag and pull out something that I learned from the class before.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to do though, right? Because once you've got those skills, it's so hard to shelve them, right? It's like on an ego level, you want to show people that you can do stuff. You don't want to be pulling the punches and not doing your wrestling move or not doing your jiu-jitsu lock or something. It's so hard not to reach into the bag when it's right there. And I've had past conversations with Martin Wheeler, Manuel Manolo-Kekes, other people who are like, it's great to have those things in the toolbox. It's like Martin said, I've got a pretty tasty left hook, and like in boxing days that would come out. Everybody has their favorite thing that comes out, and he's like, sometimes I see the Systema equivalent of a left hook there, right? And it's my go-to, but I actively work on anything else but that, so that I get the chance to beef things up. But in a fight, ultimately, if the pressure is on, you're probably going to default to your left hook if you know it works, right? It's going to come out. But I guess that's the answer to the paradox, is that in a fight you don't have to worry about doing your favorite thing is going to happen, right? So you don't need to train that any more than you've already got for most of the time. It's everything else that you need to kind of bring up to pace, and then give your body some other options other than that double left hook.
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. And that's where I think a lot of the glitches were occurring, because a lot of the training was specifically in response to something that an attacker was doing. So for Martin's example, I might have had a really nice left hook, but that would only apply when the attacker moved in a certain way or was in a certain position.
Responded like a boxer, and your setups for the left hook.
Sure, absolutely. So I found myself having to read a particular situation or attack, and then trying to process very quickly, saying, okay, now I can do this kick, or I can do this hook, or throw this punch based on a movement that the attacker was doing. And then there was still that time lag and the processing, which became more difficult, because as my training expanded, I realized I had several different tools that I could use for that one scenario, and I was reaching for a hammer and I was reaching for a saw at the same time, and it wasn't working. Systema freed all of that up for me.
There's been I think I mentioned it I think it was in a past podcast. It might have been with Sergei Makarenko, like quoting Mikhail on this, or it might have been direct from Mikhail, I can't remember. But I think he was talking about one of the reasons why it's so difficult to do that, like, addendum approach to learning martial arts, to be like, okay, I'm a pretty good boxer, I've got pretty good hands, but I need some skills if somebody gets past my hands and just shoots at my legs and brings me down or something like that, right? And I'm okay on the ground, jiu-jitsu, but I'm kind of, my takedowns aren't like great, so how am I going to get into the ground? I can't just sit down and wait for him to come to me, right? Which some jiu-jitsu tournaments, that's how they start, right, now, and stuff like that. But that fill in the gaps approach of, like, I'm just going to add on different styles and fill in techniques, which in some ways is where MMA began, and now it's morphed into something a lot more seamless and a lot more interesting, I think. Like, they've looked at ways to put these together. But I think if you just glue traditional styles together, it often doesn't work. And the reason why is that you fundamentally hold your spine and your mindset in different ways. You structure yourself in different ways for those different styles. So a boxing stance is different to a wrestling stance even, right? A wrestling stance is a lot more crouched over. The hips are pulled backwards to kind of occlude the legs so that you don't get as quick access to the hips, right? Wrestlers don't want their hips controlled no matter what. Boxers don't really care. They're just I just want my hips here under me so that I can twist them and smash them in the face as hard as possible, right? So it's a different kind of thing. So boxing footwork works on keeping you upright, mobile, right? So that you can create and close distance and use evasion and draw and all of those kinds of things. Wrestling footwork is not the same at all. Wrestling footwork is like, you're not getting my legs or my hips, and if you try and get them, I'm just going to flop my chest on you, and then we can sort this out further on the ground, that kind of that way. And jiu-jitsu is different again, right? You hold your spine in different. With jiu-jitsu, you want your hips to be mobile as soon as you hit the ground, right? So you're trying to kind of move around that point and find fluidity. So the problem is that you can try and flick between those things, but there's always a lag time, right? And I think in cognitive neuroscience, they call this, I'm trying to think, it's gone out of my head.
Like the OODA loop or something? Or?
No, it comes into the OODA loop because there's a delay when you reorient yourself, right? So for the observe, orient, decision, action part, there's a reorientation every time you do that. It's frame switching, that's what it's called. So with frame switching, in cognitive neuroscience, they talk about how multitasking doesn't work, right? That everybody thinks they can multitask. But actually what happens is that every time you switch from, doing an email to picking up the phone to like opening up a social media site to do a quick post to copying that to something else and then losing the memory of what it was that you opened it up for in the first place. Every time you do that, there's you feel like it's seamless in your head because your brain creates like this narrative that you're just the same person all day long and you're doing the same things. But what's happening is your brain's drawing from different sets of patterns. And every time you do that, you're accessing different parts, and there's an energy cost, right? That actually it costs energy to do that. And that starts to wear you out, and it also creates a lag. Right, it's not as seamless as you think as you jump from one thing to the next. You don't do any of those tasks particularly well because there's always like a lag time as you go into them. And further, another thing that it does is create stress. Right, it basically makes you feel like you're under attack if you have to task switch again and again and again, keep changing your cognitive framework. It's usually because you feel like you're under attack on all sides. So if you're trying to do that on purpose, if you're trying to jump abruptly from a Muay Thai stance to a jiu-jitsu like pattern, right? Or like a holding pattern or a place where you feel like you can hold them off, or something like that within jiu-jitsu, then a whole bunch of things are happening and it's not as seamless as you think. And there's gaps in those things, right? There's gaps in those things. Your spine is moving in and out of straightness and curved positions in different ways. And your brain is moving in and out of different mindsets and ways of thinking. And that leads to this kind of muddled, discombobulated approach, right? Which can work as long as it's fast and physically overwhelming. But if somebody is very, very together and very, very present and just wants to do one thing to you, which is just find your chin and pick you off, in the midst of all of this stuff, they'll probably do it, right? And I think a lot of the evolution of MMA from what it was like 20 years ago to what it is now has been about shaving those things down and making it less discombobulated and being like, let's make it one seamless thing as we start. And Systema, I think, is an approach, an attempt to do that from the ground up, from day one. It's like everything we do has to be integrated. Everything has structure, the same kind of structure, right? Everything is driven by and led by breathing and like supported by breathing and like constant movement. So we have these principles that we fall back on, regardless of whether on the ground, standing up, in the boardroom, selling something. It's kind of all the same thing. So it gives you this kind of security in your brain and in your physical structure that allows you to play, right? From that structure you can create. Whereas I don't think you can be very creative when you're just trying to glue bits of other people's styles together.
Yeah, absolutely, Lynn. That was certainly my experience, and where it really manifested itself the most was when I would go to seminars, and there would be individuals from a variety of different disciplines there, and I immediately would try to sum up the person I was across from and say, is this person a boxer? Is this person a karate person? And I'd say, okay, well now we're going to move this sort of way.
Sure.
With Systema, all of that sort of predisposition and assumption about who may be across from me goes away because I'm focused as much on myself as I am on them, and a lot of those things then carry into the workplace as well, where most of us are required to do a lot of things multitasking as well, and that ability to sort of process things from a variety of different inputs into a seamless sort of manner, I think has helped in certainly a lot of other areas as well. It's more so on the mindset than it is just on the physical training.
Do you feel that's is that a concrete skill that you feel like you've acquired in the workplace as a result of doing Systema? Have you actually noticed a difference in the way that you approach multitasking work? I mean, sales and marketing is horrendously spread out, right? There's always something to do. Everything seems urgent all the time, so you must have a lot of this multitasking kind of task switching.
I do, and I think a lot of it has to do with a greater ability to sort of recognize, first of all, when I'm in an environment where I'm being asked to do a lot of things at once against a specific timeline. So I think the first thing is sort of recognizing that you're in that situation. And then I'm in a much better position, I think, to be able to sort of cope with it and not get things to the point of where they're out of control or a point of where I feel like I'm overwhelmed with things. And a lot of the training that we're doing in Systema puts us in those sort of situations, particularly doing some of the multiple attacker drills and things like that, where I'm able to stitch together those individual things and make them so they're not as bumpy. And so they're much so the impact on me is much smoother, and I don't feel as if things are out of control. So certainly it's been helpful.
So you feel like that alone, that ability to stay present and see the big picture and just kind of deal with it in the midst of all the chaos, kind of that alone has made you kind of calmer in your work? Or,
it does, and I think also being in sales and marketing, there's a tendency to try to please everyone. And one of the challenges I was having was, being able to prioritize things. And much like in a lot of our training now, that we have an ability to sort of determine what's a real threat, what's not a threat, where am I in danger, where am I not in danger. So I think being able to prioritize and say, now, is this really something that's urgent that I need to deal with now? Or is this something in my own mind that
I've made it urgent?
I've made it urgent simply as a desire to sort of please everybody and get stuff done. So I think in terms of ability to multitask, being able to prioritize things and sort out what needs to be done first has been helpful as well.
That's very interesting. I've not really thought about it that way. Lately, I've been trying, just working on a bunch of different fronts. I'm always coming up with some new prioritization, time management thing, like from Eat That Frog 20 years ago through essentialism and all these stuff. I've always, every 6 months, I seem to look for a new way of juggling work efficiency. But I very rarely kind of made that connection with what we do in Systema. But it's what's jumped into my head right away is like a few admonitions from Vlad, like when you're doing free work, for example, and you're moving around. I remember I was up at HQ once, and he kind of just stopped everybody. He's like, "Okay, guys, grab, escape, control the guy, put him down," and then it got kind of chaotic, and everybody just ended up in piles on the ground and all that kind of stuff, right? And or they were just kind of slapping at each other or hand fighting, that kind of stuff. And he's like, guys, stop. And he goes, "You're too busy to do good work." Right. It's just like you're just doing something, right? Like the guy comes in and grabs and you just start moving, like just for the sake of doing something, right? But it's not an efficient thing, and it's not carrying you through. Like you're too busy to do good work, and to me that's like that's a pathology of modern life, right? There's all these inputs and digital responsibilities, and what we do is answer the next email and answer the next phone call, and we do it, and we keep ourselves busy, and then we kid ourselves into thinking that we've actually achieved something. And you get to the end of the day, and you're like, all right, what were my 3 big rocks for today? I've made no progress on any of those. Right. All I did was other people's work all day long, right? And the other one was, the other thing that Vlad says a lot is that do your own work, right? Don't allow yourself to be controlled by the other person, by their threats, by their, their suggestions physically, in a sense, right? You almost have to move as if you were going to do something anyway, right? And you have to be responsive to other people. You can't ignore them at all, but you have to make sure your work is your own and it's not as just a reaction to what somebody else is doing. And that's the same thing, right? So if you're constantly just responding to emails as if every single one of them requires a 1-minute turnaround, and you end up getting messages, or even worse, you just get into these continuous threads. Like once you answer it once, you're like, oh man, this is going to be an ongoing thing for the next half an hour, and then there goes my morning, So, but if you just focus on like, all right, what is my own work today? My own work today might be producing this website, or my own work today might be negotiating a contract on this new building, or whatever it's going to be. And if you're not doing your own work, ultimately you're not going to get an efficient result, and you're not going to be, and you'll stress yourself out, and you'll run around in circles, and you won't really make any progress. So that's an interesting problem.
Yeah, and I think all of us have those demands on us, no matter what sort of industry or field we're in. We would sometimes refer to that as swatting at gnats. Right, as if these things are just sort of buzzing around your head, and you're just sitting there. You're doing a lot of movement. You're sort of trying to sort of keep things under control. You may get one or two of the gnats, but at the end of the day, they're still just sort of buzzing around.
You'll never get them all. Yeah, they reproduce too fast.
They reproduce too fast. Yeah, and so you always you'll be spending most of your time and energy on things that really don't provide much of a result for you.
Interesting. So do you up at Maryland? And in the preceding group at DC Systema, what's kind of the demographic of people that come into your group? Is it mostly people who come looking for self-defense and martial arts, or is it kind of a spread? Because I've seen it evolve over time with my group here, where it initially was people that are just looking for like the new exotic self-defense thing, or the people that have tried a lot of different martial arts, and they're like, I've been researching it, I know all about Systema, I've been reading, and we found you, like great. But now I'm getting more and more people who are like looking for a different physical pursuit. Right, they've done CrossFit, they've done yoga, and they're like, I need something different, a different challenge, and I need something that's going to help calm me down. Right, I can go do CrossFit, but it doesn't make me feel any better mentally afterwards. Right, it psychs me up, and most people's jobs are so chaotic, and their lives are so full of pressure now, psychological pressure, that they're looking for new things that might calm them down.
Right.
And so we're getting more and more, I'm getting more people kind of in the middle age and up bracket, and who are coming and then staying because it's doing what they wanted to do. Are you seeing that too, or is it still mostly
We're still seeing people? Yeah, still seeing a blend of that. I think a combination of two things, or common denominators on some of the current and new students. One are the folks that spend a lot of time in the cars commuting. The traffic in DC is notoriously some of the worst in the country. And I think that there's an appeal to individuals not only to be able to utilize some of the techniques and things that we do in Systema to sort of make that drive certainly a little more bearable, but also a lot of the highly publicized incidents of road rage in the DC area. So there's certainly that element of self-defense there. The other common denominator are people that actually work in DC, that maybe not drive into work, but take the public transport systems on some of the trains that oftentimes find themselves having to work a little later in the evenings and then have to walk over to the metro by themselves. DC is a very peculiar city in the sense that after normal working hours, there's not a lot of individuals sort of out and about walking around. The streets sort of clear out, and then when dark, some of the folks that you may not want to have around sort of come out. So,
and then like any city, big capital, you've got the haves and the have-nots pressed against each other, right? You've got $1 million apartments right next to kind of tenements and things like that. It's like,
absolutely. So there's
London was the same.
There's a lot of interest in some of the things in Systema that we do around improvised weapons. These folks are walking back to the metro with umbrellas and briefcases, or they're stopping off at the grocery store picking up things to take home for dinner. A number of people are interested in some of the personal protection aspects, where they have young children that are in strollers and they're walking along with their wives, and or maybe they're carrying their son or a child with them. How do they protect themselves or their loved ones in a bad situation? So those elements of the improvised improvised weapons and some of the personal protection things, I don't think that a lot of the traditional martial arts cover as well as we do. So there's certainly appeal to that as well.
Don't miss your chance to train with senior Systema instructor Martin Wheeler at the 4-day Masterclass North Carolina, October 10th to 13th, 2019. The theme this year is Soft Work to Full Speed, a progressive multi-day exploration of fighting tactics, covering basic moving and striking, advanced grappling and takedowns, full speed knife and stick work, and tapping the unconscious mind in combat. The event is strictly limited to 35 persons, and advanced pricing is $650 for both days by April the 1st, with the option of a non-returnable deposit of $150 to hold your spot. Register online at ncsystema.com/events or email us for more details.
So with your like sales and marketing hat on, right? When you come to Systema and like now you're officially kind of running a group and trying to make it popular, do you see that as like a unique value proposition, like it's a unique selling point of Systema? You're like, yeah, well, if people want to learn how to beat people up one-on-one, they can train Muay Thai or Krav or something else, right? But if you're passing down from within that to a subset of people who want it for practical defense, then rather than be like, we kick better and we punch harder and we're smoother and stuff like that, we're actually saying, well, you can learn that in a lot of ways, that's a given, but we offer these unorthodox approaches to defending yourself that might work in a wider range of situations. Is that a good selling point for people if they're trying to?
I think so, particularly since at the beginning of the class, I'll typically ask the folks, what would you like to cover? And those sort of requests are coming up more and more frequently, which is interesting. The other element is that because we're in DC, a number of students actually work for the military or work for specialized government agencies where they carry firearms as part of their job. So there have been some requests lately for some of the ground mobility and work while actually carrying a weapon.
Or weapon retention.
Weapon retention, those sort of things. So there are some things, I think, specific to the DC market that may allow us to sort of mold how we do our outreach and mold a little bit about the course curriculum and maybe begin to sort of shape some of the students that we sort of build the program around. But all of those things, in addition, just the basic, I want to do striking tonight, I want to sort of things come up. But there are some specific nuances that are, I think, functionally specific to the careers and specific to the geography and the areas that a lot of students are feeling unsafe in. I got involved in a lot of the martial arts for a similar sort of reason, primarily because I was traveling a lot, going on cruises, and we wanted to board, get off the ship, and sort of wander around the town a little bit. And there were some concerns that we may be in an area that might not be the best place to be. What if something bad happens? So we wanted to be prepared for those sort of things. And I think some of the students have a similar sort of sentiment of being prepared for the unexpected, and they may not find that in some of the other styles.
Sure. Cool. Where do you and this might be a tricky question, where do you see people falling down on the way that they advertise Systema? Because in the past, so the way that we advertise NC Systema, it's like, so we have, you got the website, right? And you've got like maybe a Facebook page or an Instagram thing or something like that. And I try and I try not to like post the roughest stuff that we do, because like you just post that on Instagram and then, like Mary Jane housewife who's thinking about learning self-defense sees two hairy bald dudes like stabbing each other or something. It's like, that's not the thing for me, right? But at the same time, you don't want to just show people doing breath work and movement because they're like, oh, it's a yoga class. I'm not going to go there and learn real martial arts, right? So you have to try and pitch it to the middle and show a range of things from slower, softer work to, to you last night kneeing somebody repeatedly or something like that. That's the most recent.
That was a fun time.
It's a good one. But, so you have to try and pitch to the middle. And I sometimes feel like my tendency or that policy of pitching to the middle risks pleasing nobody, right? That you don't get the hardcore martial arts people and you don't get the softcore people either. So it's so sometimes I question my own policy on that, but I've not found a better one yet. And I've seen others, advertise and either they don't have a website and they just rely on word of mouth or something like that, or they have a website but it's just all in camo and it's like, we kill, we destroy, and you're like, okay, if that's all the people that you want to come, then that's fine, right? But you shouldn't be surprised that there's only 3 of those in your immediate area, right? And that kind of stuff, and not many people go all the way the other way in Systema. I've not seen a lot of people who are like, we don't really do combat, it's all about health. There's a few, like Kaizen up in the Northwest, right? He's gone full, like, we don't even do martial applications anymore. It's all about like kind of health and cleansing the body and that kind of stuff. So he's unusual in doing that, I think. I haven't seen many other people take that tack. Well, from your kind of, with your marketing expertise, right? For the benefit of all the instructors or people with training groups here who might be trying to set up, what mistakes do people see people making, and how do you think we could fix them?
Sure. Well, I think what you're pointing out is a common challenge, and that's something that we've seen even here at Maryland Systema. I think even individuals that are really good at user interface and web design have understood that as a problem as well in terms of outbound marketing. So I think one of the ways to approach it is to give the consumer what they want. Even a lot of websites nowadays will have a user flow that sort of directs users from the main page to other pages based upon what they're interested in. Are you looking for this? Click here and then you go down this path. Are you looking for that? Click here and go down that path. I think that where we may eventually move towards is recognizing that there are those distinct groups of users, that they are being attracted and coming to learn from 2 different ends of the spectrum. And maybe the best approach would be is to have a breathing mobility class. And then if folks want to stick around, you can roll into sort of more of the martial, more the self-defense elements of that. I think trying to blend both of those together into one approach, or trying to blend both of those things together into a single class will please some people but alienate others. Or as you pointed out, nobody is happy.
Not pleasing nobody. But I mean, we've been experimenting with that with the last year of having dedicated breathwork classes, right? So we have our standard Systema classes in the evenings. And then a couple of day classes where we have a breathwork one and a movement class. So it's purely to study movement. Right? And then and then each of those is like a 45-minute class that we do from noon till 12:45. And then if they want to stay for another 45 minutes to do like Systema, then they can. Or if they just work, if they just work a lot of evenings, we have people who tend bar or do or they're shift workers, or they just work a lot in evenings. Then they can come and do just a 45-minute Systema class during the middle of the day. And I find that works quite well, because it kind of gives people a window where they can come, do it, go back to work again. They can get their kind of Systema fix for the day. And if all they're really interested in is taking an hour out from their day and de-stressing themselves, or coming in for an hour to work on movement to rehab an injury, then they know what's going to go on in that class. They're not coming in thinking, I hope this is going to be breath work and massage today, and then we're like hitting each other with sticks and that's what's striking. Exactly. And like, this is not what I wanted today out of my Systema training, right? And that kind of stuff. So I'm finding that separating those out works quite well. I mean, obviously up at Vladimir's HQ, they have the breathing class a couple of times a week, and you know what you're in for when you go to that, right? It's an hour of walking, breathing, exercise, breathing. And by the end of it, you're energized and you feel great. And then most people stay and then do a class after that, but not necessarily. Like, Valerie trains the breathwork class and then goes and stuff like that. So I found that model was really interesting, and we've been experimenting with it. But it's hard to I've had trouble driving people who don't already do Systema into those classes, right? I'm like, well, we've got this other thing now. This should appeal to another part of the Venn diagram, right? This is people who don't want to get sweaty and wrestle dudes, but do want the benefits of the breathwork. But it's still hard to sell to those people, right? To get them to come into that beneficial breathwork class. I find it much easier to businesses, right? I work for a couple of different corporations, and I tell them the sort of class that I'm going to do, and they're like, great, that's the sort of class we want. And then you put that on, and then they all come from within the corporation, within the business to go and do it. It's much easier to do that than it is business to customer. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I think generally speaking, I think just from a pure outbound marketing approach, my opinion is to try and throw out as big as net as possible, and then you've got to do a really good job of sort of pulling out the tuna from the tires and sort of things. I have spoken with individuals that, for example, are in sort of peripheral sort of businesses like personal trainers.
Yeah.
And in the DC area, they seem to get a much better inbound response and a much better initial retention from students when they position their personal training as a way to de-stress, right, as opposed to sort of become fitter. Right?
Sure.
However, that's a certain segment of the market. There's another group of individuals where the initial attraction rate and the retention rate are very, very high. And those are individuals that have a very specific goal in mind. They've got an event or they've got something that's occurring with a specific end date. So, for example, somebody that's getting married, right, will want to hire a personal trainer or maybe get into a fitness program because they've got a specific goal. Somebody training for a marathon.
Sure,
some
a
other
Tough Mudder or something.
A Tough Mudder or something.
Yeah.
So I think much like a lot of sales, it's really sort of qualifying the individual and then coming up with a program that is best suited to what they're trying to do. It really comes down to understanding what they're trying to get out of it. Initially, that's hard. Particularly when you've just got somebody walking in the door that has maybe no preconceived or maybe lots of preconceived ideas about what's going to happen sort of next. But I think it's important to be able to have those different programs and give people the flexibility and the option to sort of self-select, right?
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and this it's always created a bit of tension with me. The whole, I've never been trained in sales or marketing or anything like that, and for a lot of people who haven't, there's like this idea, this unsavory idea of the used car salesman, almost like, what have I got to do to get you into this fine dojo and that kind of stuff. And so, but I've come over the years to look at it more like, well, I'm giving people the opportunity. All I'm doing is laying out the opportunity so they're well informed, so that they can choose it or not. And it's it seems like in seminars and like open groups before, when Vladimir has taken questions about running your school and things like that, and Valerie is usually the mastermind of how to run the business and things like that. Vlad's happy to outsource that to her, I think. But typically, like his approach seems to be like, people will find Systema if they need it. Right? You shouldn't chase people. You shouldn't like pull them back in. If they want to come, they'll come, and if they don't, they don't. That's considerably easier to say when you're the world authority on it, and you've already got this whole thing that's built up over years. I mean, when Vlad started, he had the videos, right? And about 80% of the people I talk to on this podcast who are instructors have been training for like 20 odd years and that sort of stuff. And like, how did you find out about it? Like, oh, Vlad made some videos. It's like, so if he hadn't made those videos, and he hadn't got that groundswell from people figuring out what Systema might be able to do, then he wouldn't have had the opportunity to show them, and then he wouldn't be in a position to be like, oh, people will find us, right? If they don't know you're there, they won't find you, especially in a place like DC. It's pretty big.
Absolutely. And I think even if they find you, I think most consumers, individuals, no matter what product or service they're considering buying, there's still a due diligence process that they go through. So individuals, I think, are still putting a lot of weight in the consideration of trust, authority, credibility, sort of thing. So the advice I would give to other instructors or other schools is, understand where your prospects and where your customers are looking and what sources they turn to, and make sure that you have a presence there. Right. So get the website up, have some presence on YouTube, get a Facebook page stood up, maybe do some other content syndication, sort of get your things out there, because these students, they have other choices and other options available to them, and at least having that awareness of you being an established business, right, with an established sort of following and some good reviews behind you goes a really, really long way. Not much. You can put a lot of programs together. You can give a lot of thought about how you want to do these sort of things, but nothing's going to happen unless that person walks in the front door.
Sure. Yeah. Well put. Do you think people are more quick to judge these days in this kind of like fast turnaround attention economy? When you post videos and things, people say if you don't get them in the first 5 seconds, they're just going to stop watching the video. So what's the point? Do you think people do that when they show up to weigh up a Systema class, or are we looking at a different class of person who's more introspective, who's going to take more time to weigh up what it is.
I think people are still as judgmental as they always have been, and I think individuals still tend to make those judgments fairly quickly, which is why I think it's critically important to have that presence across a broad spectrum.
Yeah.
Right, because they may see the YouTube video and say, "Well, that looks interesting," but let me go look and see if they're, they've got any other content, or if there's any other reviews, or they've got a Yelp page, or they're, got a Google My Business place, or something like that. When we used to do a lot of the analytics on consumer behavior, we would typically see individuals would go to 9 different internet properties before actually coming back to a site to make a purchase.
Wow, so that's how they vet you.
That's how they vet you. And this is for a purchase that average sales price of about $250.
Yeah.
People would go through that many steps. And the key then was to understanding those sandboxes where those consumers were going to look for those sort of things, and then making sure that you were playing there as well, and that you had a favorable presence. More importantly, if you decide to position yourself more towards the martial side or on the art side of things, it's critically important to make sure that messaging is consistent across all the different properties. When you start to put things out online, there's a challenge sometimes to make sure that that message is the same, the branding is the same, and you begin to sort of create that awareness around not only Systema but yourself as well. Because that's all going to come into play.
Yeah, fascinating. Good stuff. Yes, there's an interesting. Again, I'm seeing parallels in my head. It's an annoying trait when you hang out with Systema instructors long enough. There's everything is Systema, right? Doesn't matter what you're talking about. You're like, it's just like in Systema. The way it's critical how you hold your posture and how you present yourself, right? Because that can make a decision between somebody approaching and not approaching, right? Or committing or not committing and that kind of stuff, right? So if you're posturing isn't correct or it's inconsistent, right? You're trying to do one thing, but then you show something else, right? So you're trying to keep nice straight posture, but you have like an angry face, right? Or something like that. Or you're trying to do soft work with your hands, but then when you find something, you like grip really, really hard and trying to apply pressures. You're giving inconsistent messages to people physically, and therefore their tendency is to resist or retreat or like that kind of thing, right? So I can see that in that, like if you give a person one message and sort of say, "Hey, come and try this thing. It's great for stress relief." And look at all the reviews we've got, and then they show up, and it's everybody's 10 minutes late, nobody's there to greet them. Do you know what I mean? It's like the posture you're giving them is just like, we don't really care. Do you? That kind of thing.
Absolutely, and the sort of high level of that is the degree of likability.
Yeah.
Right. And sort of how you conduct yourself and how you welcome that student, how you present yourself. It's sort of like how I used to manage and run my sales teams. I used to say to a new hire, I don't care, how much software you sell, how much money you make for yourself or for the business. Just don't mess up my team.
Right.
And that's one of the things I find extremely attractive and enjoyable about Systema is that atmosphere is consistent across no matter where I train.
Sure.
And I've been to a lot of seminars, and there's that same sort of welcoming, the same sort of openness, and the same sort of friendliness that is across schools and instructors all over the world. And I certainly don't see that, I don't think, with a lot of the other styles as well. I think the challenge then is for us as instructors and running schools is to somehow figure out a way to convey that to prospects.
Sure, yeah. That we have this... so I think some other social fitness crazes and things try and create that as like an add-on. They're like, look, we can have a group of people all doing a thing and it's going to build camaraderie. It's like, well, this is already built into Systema, I think. Probably because we spend so much time working on empathy or trying to figure out how somebody else is thinking or moving or feeling. It's built into the style, right? You have to interact with people on a relationship level. So.
Absolutely. And you look at some of the videos and you look at somebody that's maybe drawn into this for the self-defense aspects of it. Some of those things can be a little intimidating and maybe a little scary to maybe a large segment segment of the people that would benefit the most from what we're trying to do.
Sure.
So the challenge for us, I think, is how to certainly maintain that balance of seriousness along with playfulness, along with likability, coupled with credibility.
Sure.
And I think that requires a little bit of effort, a little bit of time, certainly a lot of thought, but I think it really comes down to most of it just sort of being ourselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's just sort of being ourselves and conveying that message to others, because I think for the most part, all of us are pretty likable. You just got to get to know us.
Yeah, right. Well, you certainly present that as well. Everybody likes you, Joe.
Right,
so it's
right. Even no matter how hard or how many times you hit me, Glenn, I still like you.
That's weird. I keep trying. Yeah, but yeah, that's and I think like another mistake that people make is that they try to not misrepresent themselves, but to try to kind of put a mask on it, or try and present themselves as something they aren't quite, try and claim expertise they don't have. For example, I work with sometimes like military, law enforcement groups, things like that. And the first thing I do is say, look, I've never been downrange and I've never served, right? I'm just a civilian, but I have some skills that might be of use to you, right?
Sure.
I get that out of the way immediately if I'm working with, because otherwise, if you try and be like, well, this is going to save your life because I shoot people, and it's just like, no, what does he know? This British guy that comes wandering around here or something. So I think it's important to admit what it is that you can't do, right? And to present yourself honestly and be like, look, I'm good at this, I'm less good at this, we're all on the learning continuum, and juggle that obviously with credibility, because people don't like to be too qualified in their instructor. They want to know that you're competent and that you've got all these skills, but I think you can do that without having to lie about what it is that you can do. Right?
Absolutely, and I've certainly seen that as well, and I've always wondered why people do that.
Yeah,
I mean, certainly
you'll get found out eventually.
You
right?
get found out, and it's just like in sales, the same sort of thing. Is that you're really trying to go into things where that initial meeting is in many instances like the first date. There's a honeymoon period, but in order to build things, you really need to have the relationship. And the way to do that is you've got to be open and honest, communicate, have a high level of integrity, and all those things I think need to be set from the beginning. I think there's a saying on how it begins is how it ends. Yeah. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? So I think that the challenge for us then is how do we convey that to people?
Yeah.
Particularly when a lot of us are doing things online, and get that messaging out there. And there's some things you can do. Certainly podcasts are a way to do that, in videos and those sort of things. But just have that presence, and people are smart. They'll figure it out. The buyers are intelligent. The people that we're going after can have a good hound dog sense of being able to sniff these things out. And nobody wins in those situations.
Sure. Yeah.
Nobody wins. Even the person that acts like that or conveys that sort of messaging at some point sort of goes home and sitting by themselves saying, "Oh boy, maybe this isn't what I should be doing."
Sure. Yeah. And at the end of the day, to Vlad's point of like you shouldn't chase people a little bit, I think maybe that's where it comes in, is that the goal in this is not to sell things to people as much as possible, right? It's to fill your classes with people who want to do Systema and offer the benefits of it, and be able to keep the doors open, right? You still got to pay the bills and that, so you need like a critical mass of people to do that. But at the end of the day, if you're just, and some schools do this, right? Some other martial arts schools are just more of the high turnover model. They're like, we'll scam them into doing the program and the black belt in a year or something, and then when they fall off, who cares? We got their money up front, right? But we never want to be that guy, right? We never want to be those people. So the goal, we have to be as honest as we can with the marketing, because the goal is just to get them in the door and introduce them to it. In my experience, once they're in the door and they've tried it and they meet the people that do Systema and how friendly they are, how welcoming it is, how kind of safe in one way they feel, but also challenged in another, right? Then it kind of sells itself, right? And then people will sort themselves out on the basis of whether or not they want to do this thing. But that critical thing, though, getting them in the door to take a look at it, that's the thing that I'm interested in, because I think it's the bottleneck for Systema growing within the United States and worldwide, right? It's like when you talk to people, you're like, what do you do for a living? You're like, oh, I teach martial arts and stress breathing and other stuff. And they're like, what martial art? And you're like, Systema. Still, most people have never heard of it, right? Sure. Outside of, unless you're in the martial arts community already,
right.
They haven't heard of it in the same way they have jiu-jitsu or karate or taekwondo, right? So we're still in that place where we're explaining to people what it is that we do.
Sure.
And I think if we're going to get beyond that, it's a numbers game. We need to get more people to just come and look at it, right? And come and try it. And then not everybody will stay, but they'll know what it is they're missing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Glenn. I mean, to your point, there's a saying in sales that nobody likes to be sold, but everybody likes to buy.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, gotcha.
So that's a key thing. And you think about, some of the challenges that we're facing specifically to what you were talking about, aren't true just to us. You look at, any sort of innovative technology company that's looking to bring a new sort of technology or software to market. One of the challenges they have is that they're coming up with something that nobody's heard of before as well. Yeah. So a lot of this, in some instances, it's it takes 9 months to make a baby.
Sure.
There's just a natural growth sort of progress. But I am amazed and very, very pleased with just in the few years that I've been training with how much the Systema community has grown and expanded.
Oh yeah.
I think the combination of the seminars and the events and some of the camps, certainly a lot of the content and things coming out of HQ will only sort of create that awareness. Like you said, it's something that when people try it, they like it.
Sure.
And a lot of businesses aren't like that.
Yeah.
A lot of software companies, you'll trial the software to the download, and you're like, boy, this thing is a buggy mess.
It's a lemon.
Forget it and move on. And unfortunately, that's why so many small businesses fail.
Sure.
Is that they just don't have that ability to build that reputation and the repeat customers. Our challenge is just getting them in the door.
Yeah. Wow, I think I see an ebook in your future, like
oh boy,
marketing for Systema instructors, stuff like that. So I would buy it. I'm listening to you now, and it's great. Bro, so what's next for you? You're going to be rolling up to Vladimir's Against Tension seminar, right? We'll both be there up in
yes,
Toronto.
We'll both be there, and from a lot of the responses I've seen online, I think it's going to be a full house. A lot of familiar faces there. I'm actually going to do an extended stay and stay through the week.
Nice.
And made sure I reserved some spots for the classes afterwards, because I think everyone else had a similar sort of idea. Maybe spend some time heading into downtown Toronto, a city that I've become very, very fond of.
Sure.
Enjoy it up there. It's going to be a nice time of year to head up there. And then look forward to some of your next seminars and some of the other events up and down the East Coast, and just keep pushing forward.
Grand. Bro. Yeah, and I'm sure your folks in Maryland and DC will benefit from you bringing some skills back from the source, right? There's no substitute for going up to HQ and just getting a reset and a new set of things to work on.
Absolutely, I've heard that referred to as drinking from the well.
Right, so the fire hose, I think.
The fire hose, right.
That's what it feels like to me anyway.
Exactly, right, open wide. But
that's right.
No, it's all great things. And once again, that's one of the things I enjoy most about Systema. It's whomever I train with and whatever seminar or event I go to, it's like reaching in the Cracker Jack box, and each time there's an entirely different prize in the bottom of the box. So it's
always exciting. Yeah,
it is. I enjoy it.
Yeah, bro. Well, thanks so much, mate. And
thanks, Glenn.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks up in Toronto. Maybe we can get a jar up there. But love to have you back on again sometime in a year and see how far Maryland Systema has grown. You can tell us how you did it.
I would enjoy that as well. Thank you, Glenn.
Cool. Thanks, mate.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to find out more about classes, workshops, and seminars at NC Systema, please visit us online at www.ncsystema.com.